Hey everyone, welcome back to the Sports Psych Show. Thanks so much for joining me. Today I'm speaking with Elisabeth Oehler. Elisabeth, welcome.
Hello, I'm very glad to be here.
Excited to have you on. We're going to be talking all things sports psychology, cultural differences in your role as a strength and conditioning coach. But let's start where we always do, Elisabeth. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us about your work.
Yeah, so I'm Elisabeth. I've been a strength and conditioning coach, probably not a strength and conditioning coach, but a coach for almost 7 years now. I started out as a quite untalented athlete, like many strength and conditioning coaches. I used to be a weightlifter, but never really made it. So that got me into like coaching, and yeah, I started out just coaching kids. I did a lot of physical education. I worked in more physical education projects in the very beginning of my career. I coached a lot of kids with disabilities, etc. While I was still studying, and it's like I kind of like it's a bit weird always to describe my pathway because I've been a coach before I studied. I studied at the same time as I've been already coaching, and then sometimes you are at the right place at the right time and offer something that, for example, an organization needs. And I coached weightlifting to kids because it was my passion. And then the German Weightlifting Federation said, "Oh, that's actually pretty cool. We need more of that. So we offer you a job if you want to manage the youth department. That would be great." So I got into my first paid job, basically in sports, was managing the youth department of the German Weightlifting Federation. And from there, like it was just like sometimes it's like if you answer a question that they have or you solve a problem, then chances just grow. And from there I went more into the high performance side. After a while, I was the head of talent identification, and I did a lot of talent transfer, so recruiting young athletes from other sports, like athletics, for example, or boxing, or we had a lot of transfer into weightlifting. And yeah, then COVID came. Everything got a bit difficult during COVID, I guess, for a lot of people. And then I was like, okay, well, the chances in sport, or just focusing on one sport, are very low. So I'm gonna make the transfer to strength and conditioning to have just more opportunities. And I moved abroad actually during COVID to Luxembourg. Worked as a consultant for long-term athletic development with several federations, including like football, basketball, and did a lot of more strategic work. And then I was like, oh, it would be nice to be coaching on the ground again. And then I went to South Africa in 20 end of 2021, and stayed in a professional rugby setup for a couple of months until I got a job offer to be a strength and conditioning coach in Saudi Arabia. And now I'm in Saudi Arabia already for almost 2 years. So since mid of 2022, I work here as a strength and conditioning coach, mainly with the national teams in the combat sports. My focus is at the moment on the junior and senior male and female teams in judo. And that's where I'm at the moment. I think there's so many other things still that I could talk about my journey, but like, yeah, these are the main stations as a coach.
And you're currently studying as well?
I've done a bachelor's degree in sports science in Germany, and then a master's in sports coaching with a more focus on pedagogy in the UK at the University of Birmingham. And now I'm doing a prof doc at Dublin City University in with Anya McNamara and Robin Taylor and all these group there in Ireland.
And other than your really fascinating CV, one of the reasons why I really wanted to have a conversation with you is because of the prof doc that you're doing. You're interested in and invested in learning about the cultural differences that one comes across as a coach as one moves from country to country, and maybe even club to club or team to team, but certainly country to country. So we're going to have a deep conversation about cultural differences. I am keen. I'm going to be a little bit of a nosy sports psychologist here around your experiences in weightlifting, because when I think of weightlifting, I've never had the pleasure of working with weightlifters, actually. And obviously from the outside in, you just think, wow, you just got to be physically strong. I mean, when you reflect back on your own weightlifting and having worked with weightlifters, and it sounds like the German Weightlifting Federation threw you in at the deep end there, which must have been really, really exciting. But, you know, the mental side of weightlifting, is that for you, the psychological side, is that an important factor? Is that a big factor?
Yeah, it's quite an important factor. So just yeah, maybe I talk a bit about my research for my bachelor's,
Yeah.
which was more on the sports psychology side. So
Okay.
the system in Germany is a bit different. You have to actually do a research project already on undergrad level in Germany. So we and mine was about the psychological characteristics of weightlifters. So I did a qualitative study, and I interviewed national team coaches. I think around eight that have been with athletes from junior level into, or developed them from junior into the senior level and until Olympic level. So all coaches I interviewed were Olympic level coaches, and have been in the development pathway as well. So, and I try to identify what are the main psychological characteristics that all these Olympians have, or and how they got developed by the coaches. So it was actually a start into getting into something more deeper like later, but like in the beginning it was more like, okay, what are the main characteristics that athletes or weightlifters need, and how are they getting developed. And what was quite interesting is that what coaches are looking for already in youth athletes, and what they think need to be there already, and what can be developed. And in particular, that resilience to cope, or the resilience to endure this really hard training, and that resilience to be able to do the same boring thing all the time, like that's something that needs to be there from the beginning. It's you can really try to make training fun, and really have a great coaching environment, and really do everything possible, but it's still quite a boring sport, or quite a repetitive sport, where you do the same things all the time. It's probably, you can compare it probably to athletics, to running, or long distance running. It's the same, or it's very similar when it comes to requirements for that mental resilience, or that's how we called it, or that's how coaches call it. Um, then and second is like, you really need to be in love with detail, as a coach and as an athlete. You really need to be in love with details so much that you're getting obsessed with it, because on elite level weightlifting, like if your bar path, for example, is half a centimeter too much behind, or too much in front, or it's or you don't hit that ideal bar path, then you're getting in trouble, and you're not gonna be able to lift your max. So it's not there's not much room for compensation. So it's like, and you really need to be able to be be obsessed with detail, and doing the same movement all over and over again, and also understand, and have a feeling for the differences, when you say, okay, well, you have to pull the bar like maybe an inch, or even like half an inch more backwards, or the contact to the thigh is like has to be a tiny bit higher. You need to be able to, or the athletes need to be able to execute that, and coaches need to be able to see that. So it's like a very very a detailed sport. And then everything is also like or when it comes to mental factors, um, it's a sport where you cannot peak very often throughout a year, or for example throughout a cycle. It's not and this is something that get a lot of athletes, or a lot of weightlifters or hobby weightlifters, or amateur weightlifters get that wrong, where they think, okay, I can give my best so and so many times, and now I'm disappointed that I'm not hitting a new personal record, or I'm not hitting those numbers that I used to hit maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago. It's really a sport where linear periodization really works, and you need to be very precise in how you do periodization, and then also you need to come to terms that you cannot be your best very often. It's really something where you maybe choose two competitions a year, where you can really focus on, and then it matters. Then you don't really it's that day or these 2 days where it really matters. Like in the Olympic cycle, it's usually the continental championships and the world championships, or now in Olympic year, the continental championships and the Olympics. These are the two competitions where you have to be more than 100%. All the rest of the year you won't be able to. And what's quite interesting in weightlifting is that, for me, it was always quite interesting to see how the athletes, after a major competition, how they fall into a deep hole afterwards, like physically and also mentally, because it's so much strain and it's so exhausting. I think every time we came back from our international competition, everyone got sick, like having the flu, or falling into like some mental and also into some mental hole, because it's been so challenging and so draining. And then you have 6 attempts, you have 3 snatches and 3 clean and jerks, and all the work from over a year goes into those 6 attempts. And yeah, it's very stressful. So yeah, that has always been very fascinating, and I think I learned a lot from that time that transfers very well to many other sports.
I think that's absolutely fascinating. So, some of the things I'd love to reflect back about what I hear here. I mean, I think that your first point around the capacity to have resilience whilst doing the boring stuff in training, I think is really interesting, because, as you say, I mean, a lot of people these days talk about the importance of enjoyment, and they might make that the equivalent of, let's say, a flow state, if you like, or they'll talk about in team sports. You've worked in rugby, if you work in football, we talk about the importance of making activities fun and engaging and interesting. But what you're saying is, this is a sport where actually the resilience, certainly in training, is a lot around dealing with the monotony of practice, doing the same things time and time again, which I think is really interesting. When you talked about the detail, putting my sports psychologist cap on, I'm thinking of the personality trait of conscientiousness, high conscientious. In fact, orderliness and industriousness, it sounds like it's very, very difficult to rise to the top without being somebody who is fascinated by the detail. And interestingly, and you didn't dwell on this much, but it sounds like you have to be interested in the detail, the external detail, but also the internal detail around the kinesthetic and the haptic sense. You kind of alluded to, being really in tune with your body in order to really know your positioning well. And then finally talking about dealing with post-competition stress, which had a real biopsychosocial feel to it, especially biopsycho, that experience of stress as a consequence of, putting stress on your body, somatic anxiety driving psychological stress. Those are some reflections back. I mean, I don't know if you have any more comments, but what I'm interested there, you mentioned in passing, and I'm sure it was just a caricature of your experience, but you said, I wasn't talented. I wasn't, and I sort of half joke, if you like, about my career in golf. I certainly didn't have the ability of many golfers. I'm sure you did have a great deal of ability, but do you kind of reflect on those qualities that you've unpacked for us and think that at that time you didn't have some of those in abundance enough?
Yeah. So, or talking about myself, and I see that a lot I see that a lot in other athletes across multiple sports. Is like, I think I had a very good mindset, and I'm fine with doing, or I was always okay with doing like this boring work. Um, and in particular, I was someone who was also, and I tolerate that around athletes that I meet based on my own experience. I was a horrible complainer when I was training or in general. I think I really I said sorry to my coach after I stopped or after I retired. I said I know I was complaining a lot and a lot, and I came sometimes to training with the absolute worst attitude ever, because I was really not in the mood to do anything. Um, but I always did it. And this is like, I always, even in the most, when I was, for example, doing a set of heavy back squats, I was saying, this sucks so much, or this is really not nice, and I'm not enjoying it. It's not fun. I don't want to do it. But I always went to the next set, and I always did it. And I always like ticked it, I always ticked it off. And this is something where I'm really, I think I have a rather controversial opinion. I tolerate that in athletes that I see. I have athletes that come to training and they don't show me the right, or they don't show this super passionate, great attitude, and they're not actually feeling very motivated, but actually they are motivated because they're showing up and they're coming and they're still doing the work. So as long as athletes always, as long as they're doing what's on that program on that day over a certain period of time, I tolerate those attitudes. And because at the end of the day, you cannot always be in that flow state. You cannot always be in that enjoyment and everything is great, everything is happy times, and everything is like, oh, it's super fun. It's just in high performance sport, that's just not the reality, and it's just not possible. And sometimes you have training sessions, and even you have phases in training where you have to go through, and where you just have to, yeah, it just, you have to, I try to not say now any explicit words, but you have to suck it up and just do it. Like and this is something I have always done. So I tolerate that in my athletes. I just lack the physical qualities for the sport. I just and there is something that's another rather controversial opinion I have. If you're not talented enough, you will cannot outwork it at least on the very, very elite level. I think you can get very, very far with hard work, very, very far. But on the absolute, and we're talking now about like really elite level, like world championships and Olympic games, etc. If there are certain physical qualities not there, it is really, really, really hard and really difficult and really and in my opinion not possible to excel like on that level. That doesn't mean hard work is not necessary, like, because I always get that I always get accused, yeah, you're valuing talent higher than hard work. No, I don't. Hard work is always important, but you cannot outwork certain lack of talent uh, if you have that goal of really being on the highest peak of the sport. Like it's just like I know that that sounds really, really hard, and there will always be exceptions, but these athletes are exceptions.
No, I agree that there's three really interesting things that you've said there that I'd like to reflect back and we can build upon. And three things I absolutely agree with you. It's interesting that you said that your coaching behaviors have been influenced by your own personal experience, how you used to express what you felt, but you engaged in the actions or the activity irrespective of how you were feeling, which I'm not going to say it's exactly the same as the psychological framework of ACT, acceptance, commitment, therapy, that we would use as sports psychologists. As sports psychologists, but it has the essence of this idea of, our thoughts, our emotions, and our feelings rise up. We can experience them, but choose not necessarily to act upon them, engage with them. We can commit to the activity anyway. And so it feels like what you're doing, your tolerance as a coach to allow your athletes to express themselves, is possibly not only useful for them, um, um, well, yes, it's essentially very useful for them. The second thing you said, I think, which was really interesting, which was related to that, was this idea of an effortless state versus an effortful state. That, sport isn't, I mean, I introduced that notion of enjoyment, and I don't think there's anything wrong with a coach in certain contexts, in certain sports, finding unique, innovative, and fun ways to engage their players, their people. But the reality, as you say, of sport, especially at the elite adult level, the very competitive level, is that, and we spoke to Bernadette Kellerman, who's doing a PhD in Edinburgh, about this effortful versus effortless states. It's lovely to get into that effortless state, but a lot of what you're going to be doing, if you want to be good at what you're doing, is going to be effortful and not necessarily enjoyable, which comes back to also Anders Ericsson's work around deliberate practice, and you talk about the monotony of practice. And then the final thing I do actually want to agree with you, that you said was controversial, and I understand why you said it was controversial, but that talent piece, which is all people with great ability, or whatever word, all these words tend to be quite controversial today, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I agree with you in as much, I mean, I think every sport can be different, in as much as there are some sports that are so dynamic that there can be a certain way to play that can allow you to rise to the top. Golf, my sport, for example, would be, there were definitely people out there who who hit the ball so well, so far. You look at them and they are just incredible. And I knew that I could never hit the ball like them. There's something, though, the dynamic of golf is, because you can chip, you can putt, and it's the finesse with your hands around the green as well, that you can kind of get away with that. But it strikes me that in a sport like weightlifting and other sports like that, that you just can't. And definitely, as you said, if you're talking about being the top 3, 5 in the world, you've got to have a lot of skill in your hands or your feet, or strength in your body, that just, as you say, hard work it won't probably be enough.
Yeah, just or just an example in weightlifting, that my former technical director always said. It's like, they're just people or athletes that are limited in leg strength, and you can do, like, they're really there's so many training methods, and you can try everything, but like, there are just some athletes adapting better than others, and we have tried so many different methods, and just my body, in fact, for example, my body just didn't adapt that well, and I never developed the same leg strength that other athletes had, so I was always limited in that part. And like, then you also, and then we go back to the mental side. If you are, for example, if you're really working so hard and you're really trying to do everything, but your body just doesn't respond that well to training. And even if you try different methods and you have been through everything, and you really tried, then it also gets like mentally frustrating at a point. And then you have to come to terms, like, and then you have to realize, I maybe don't have the physical abilities or the physical qualities that are necessary for that next step, to that next level. And I am like, I try to be very honest to athletes about it, which is sometimes very hard, because it's also difficult to understand for them. There are certain things, like even if you try so hard, it's just your body is just limited in that regard. So there are sports where you can find compensation, like in team sports, for example. If you have a if there are team sports and you just you have a lack of speed, for example, you can maybe compensate it with a high skilled, high technical level. Or, for example, I mean, athletes are also getting older, and older, and then they compensate the decrease in physical qualities with extreme experience and extreme a high technical level, and all of that works in certain sports. But there are also sports where it doesn't work, and especially in those sports that are very low skilled, or low skilled in a way of like you have a very small, or the skills that are required are not as varied, for example, as in team sports. Like weightlifting, like a snatch, you have a snatch and a clean and jerk, and that's about it. So if you really don't have the ability to increase your leg strength, your clean will always be limited. And then you can have the biggest jerk, and be super strong overhead and work on all of that. But if you cannot clean it, then all of that is also a bit yeah, for nothing. So it's, yeah, that's something, like, where I think coaches need to be more honest with athletes very often. And also, there needs to be a lot more research done in regards to sport specific research, in regards to yeah, the physical qualities that are necessary. Because at the moment we do very shallow profiles for the physical and also mental demands of sports.
You've mentioned there about the importance of being honest with the people that you are coaching. And I'd like to briefly move on now, if it's possible, to relating your experiences of doing a master's in coaching with an emphasis on pedagogy and what you do now as a coach. Any influences? What's important to you as a coach? You've talked about honesty there, for example. Looking down your X timeline, I see you posting these really interesting, engaging clips of you coaching, and I wondered, what's going on in your mind. What are you trying to? How are you engaging your people, your players? How are you helping them learn? How are you potentially helping them compete? So, a very broad question. I do apologize, but you're into having this underpinning educational process to accompanying your coach development. You did a master's in coaching with an emphasis on pedagogy. How has that influenced your coaching today?
I would say, like, my journey in coaching has taken or like my journey, or becoming a coach, has been highly influenced by athletes and what they expect from me. And then I try to develop the tools through, for example, my master's, or further education, in order to accommodate the needs that athletes have. And something I have figured out for myself, and which is where I think, which also limits me in a certain type of way in what jobs I can do at the moment, is like, I try to be really myself and really authentic. And there are athletes that really connect very well with the way I coach and the way I am, and I'm also able to adapt to them. And then there are athletes who, for example, are still struggling with dealing, for example, with a coach being very honest or holding them accountable. And then it gets quite difficult. But I try to continue being myself and being like very authentic, in order to like teach them that this is how you have to be in sports. I think one of the biggest issues, especially as a strength and conditioning coach, because as a strength and conditioning coach, and I'm very straightforward here, you're really on the bottom of everything. Like, you're really, as a strength and conditioning coach, you're really not very often valued that much. Yeah, like, I don't know how often people see me as like just being the gym instructor. And it is from management, athletes, sports coaches, etc. Like, we're really on the bottom. Um, but I still think like that I, like, the way I coach or the way I approach my job has been quite, yeah, it has been a bit away of this, oh, I just deliver gym sessions, because that's how a lot of S&C coaches have to work, unfortunately. They are delivering gym, and they delivering gym sessions, and that's it. And they don't, and then they maybe have that, yeah, they maybe think they can build some mental toughness through grueling workouts and stuff like this, but that's about it. And like, throughout my time now in different sports, I've always like taken my role as a strength and conditioning coach a bit beyond that. And I try to have really meaningful connections and relationships with my athletes, so that I have a bigger impact on their actual performance. So even though I deliver gym programs, and I do programming, I've always had I try to have very good relationships with the athletes that are deeper than probably sometimes what's expected from me, and sometimes are also what is like the common ground in strength and conditioning practice. So throughout my journey, or throughout working in different countries and different sports, I always had athletes that I connected with on a rather deeper level, and I try to make a better environment for them, and a better coaching, or create a better understanding for their own journey as an athlete, and things like professionalism and mindset as well. Even though, like, I'm not a sports psychologist, but I do believe that coaches, by just creating a very healthy, open, honest, authentic coaching environment, you have a lot of impact, and you have a lot of influence on mental skill development by just creating a safe space for athletes to develop. So that has always been my goal, and or that has been the driving factor in like why I'm a coach and why I like to develop athletes. And I think I lost now a bit the plot to our original question because I've been talking so much. But yeah, maybe we can you can repeat the question again, and then I'll go back to the.
No. It's absolutely perfect. I mean, there's so many avenues I can take here. It's really interesting listening to you, and I can only but confirm that for me, I can't imagine if I work with a team. Within a club or within an organization, if I want to be make as much impact as I possibly can, Elisabeth, as a sports psychologist, I want to work as an MDT, a multidisciplinary team, or within a multidisciplinary team. And I always say that whether it's a strength and conditioning coach, a sports scientist, head of performance coach, you do psychology in your role, just as a coach does psychology in their role every single second of every single minute of every single activity of every single session of every single day. You might not be a sports psychologist per se, just as I'm not a strength and conditioning coach, but you're doing it every single second. I always say that the gym, and I know strength and conditioning coaches go outdoors and are on the field, on the grass, but the gym, on the grass, these are psychological playgrounds for me. I think they're ideal environments to learn, develop mental skills, and everything that anybody can think about related to mindset. So I completely agree with you. I mean, I think it's really interesting because listening to you, I mean, I've written down 4 words that could could potentially be the four values that you coach by. I'm
Yes.
not saying they are, I'm just, this is what I'm hearing. And that's authenticity, honesty, accountability, and relationship. These are four massive things. And you've spoken a bit to honesty, and you spoke a lot there to authenticity. I just I wouldn't mind exploring accountability here. Why is accountability, why is holding your athletes accountable so important to you? What can you tell me a little bit about that, and how might you do that?
I think I for a lot of athletes, and in particular younger athletes, it's very difficult, and they don't really understand the difference between being held accountable and being criticized, because it's not the same. But the mistake many coaches make, unfortunately, is like they think they are holding athletes accountable, but in reality they're actually just criticizing them or giving them negative feedback. Negative feedback is also not the same as holding someone accountable. And I try to teach, because a lot of athletes are a bit traumatized from other sports coaches or whatever, when it comes to that difference of being held accountable and being getting negative feedback or criticism. So what I try is to always offer a solution, or let them find a solution themselves. I prefer letting them find a solution themselves. So I'm someone, I even when I'm honest, and I'm straightforward when I, for example, give feedback, I always pack it in a way that and there it's really a lot about reading the room and understanding the individual athlete. I try to pack it in a way that they get the message, but are not feeling too negative about it, and and already start a process of finding a solution for it. um, and sometimes it can, when it comes to language or coaching, it can look so different dependent on the individual you have in front of you. And there are athletes that I can hold accountable, where I can even say something really harsh, and they understand it, and they need, for example, it to be said that way. um, and then I have athletes where that's not possible, and where I'm like, where I use different words. For example, or I give you an example. I had an athlete who had always very big goals, like, oh, I wanna go to these championships, or I wanna be a professional athlete here and there. But he didn't really show up consistently to training, like even like maybe three consistently for me is like really consistently, not just 3 times a week. And then I know he was really always on the high fly with everything, and to him I could really directly say, like, listen, you're never gonna go to world championships if you just show up 3 times a week. And then that might sound very harsh, but he kind of like was starting to think about it. And I was like, how do you think the others train? Like, or how often do you think the others train? And then he looked at me, and I was like, yeah. And at the same time, I cannot use the same words, for example, with a different athlete who is not showing up regularly to training because of, for example, transportation issues. Like, I work with quite a few athletes who don't have a car, live far away, they don't have money for Uber, and then they don't show up. And then, like, cannot hold them accountable the same way I can hold this other athlete accountable. So then I'm more like, okay, we have these goals. What's the solution? How can I help you with, coming to training? Is there anything I can do from my side? Is there, maybe I can ask another athlete to pick you up and drop you back home, or you can skip those 2 sessions here and we find a different solution. You do it at home and send me videos. So, like, I try to hold them accountable in continuing the work, but I also, like, I have understanding for that individual for that individual situation. However, with the other athlete, I'm quite straightforward and quite harsh in the way I use my words. So I think that's a bit something, yeah, I have learned throughout the years, that for the same thing, not showing up for training consistently, you have different reasons for that, different backgrounds, you have different characters, and then I try to hold them accountable in different ways. And I really try to make that difference between just negative feedback and criticism and holding them accountable. Like negative feedback without a solution is most of the time quite pointless.
I really love what you're saying there, and reflecting back what I'm hearing. The difference between accountability and negative criticism or negative feedback is in two words essentially, and that's solutions and support.
Yes.
Solutions are either you're providing a solution or you're helping, you're guiding that athlete to find their own solution. Plus support, as in your encouragement, as in maybe planning what they need to do. But ultimately, once the solutions and the support is in place, the athlete has to do what they have to do. And I couldn't agree more. And the more experienced I become in my own consultancy practice, the more I'm understanding the importance of that accountability. I use the term ownership, just the importance in just helping athletes to take as much ownership. And I suppose for me as a psychologist, it's also helping them take ownership of the thoughts, emotions, feelings they're experiencing and being able to deal with them. They've even got to take ownership of those or accountability of those, because if you don't, you won't get to where you want to go, essentially.
Yes. And I always say that to my athletes, like everyone has goals. Like goal setting is usually not a big problem, and everyone wants to achieve that. But like being willing to do the work for it and going that path and having these smaller goal setting or these smaller goal setting portions of the path to the big goal, that's the way more difficult and way more important part of it. And yeah, I've never been I hate that. I see that all the time on social media, when there's a coach yelling at an athlete and then people just comment, oh, he's holding them accountable. Yelling at an athlete and like being upset about something is not holding anyone accountable. And if the support comes afterwards, maybe some kind of yelling is justified in that moment, but it also super depends on the athlete. I don't think I've ever yelled at someone really loud, but it's just not who I am. But like sometimes I know it works with some athletes and some coaches because also of the culture, if that's positive or not, it's like I don't want to judge that, but like it does work. But the actual accountability afterwards is at the end if the athlete is getting the support and if the athlete is getting the yeah the solution for changing certain behavior or changing execution on the field or in the sport or changing technical aspects. So that's then holding them accountable.
I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. You're now doing a D Prof. You're in your second year, as you said, studying at Dublin. Um, Tell me a little bit about that D Prof. I know it's around cultural aspects of coaching. You've coached around the world. Yeah, talk to me a little bit about the D Prof and what you're currently learning from your self studies.
Mm. So my prof doc is mainly about PCDEs in different cultural settings. So PCDEs are these psychological characteristics of developing excellence, and or broader, or you can say the broader. It's like mental skills,
Yes.
and how can those or my prof doc is mainly because I have worked in different countries. It's very integrated into my work. It's mainly about how does mental skill develop and mental skill development. How how are the differences between different cultures? How can we approach mental skill development, dependent also on cultural backgrounds of the athletes? Because something I have learned throughout my career so far is like coaching athletes, for example, here now in Saudi Arabia. Is very there are many similarities to coaching an athlete in South Africa or in Germany or in the UK or whatever, but there are cultural differences when it comes to communication, when it comes to also even like motivational factors, or reasons why they do sports, or reasons why, or yeah, like why they're inspired to go that pathway into professional sports. So there are differences, and my prof doc tries to explore that a bit, in order to also give practitioners who might change between countries or who might work in different countries, to give them a bit of a better overview of okay, this is something I can transfer from that environment to the other one. And here, and then there this is something where I need to have also discussions with myself around my own cultural background, my own values, and how I deliver, or how I communicate that with athletes. I think, especially here, I mean, I'm a woman in Saudi Arabia. I'm a very Western woman in Saudi Arabia, Western in a way of like, I'm not wearing a hijab. I have a full sleeve tattoo. I am very much the opposite of the culture background of the women here, but I still manage to live my true self here. And coaching athletes that are not used to that, and that are not used to it and trying to get used to it, and they still take a lot of benefit out of like the way I am and how I contribute. But I do need to have some cultural competence, in order to navigate that space. I cannot just come and like throw myself into that new culture, new culture or a new country, and think that everyone is perceiving it in a super positive and nice way, because that's not the reality. So my prof doc is really exploring, in particular, mental skill development, in different cultural settings. So a lot is about where can transfer be happening from other countries, and where do we need actual also some further research for a particular country or particular culture.
Let's start here. You mentioned that being in Saudi Arabia, you were able to be your true self, but you are also aware of, demonstrating cultural competence. If I may ask,
Mhm.
you'll have a personal thread to your life in Saudi Arabia. You'll have a professional thread to your life in Saudi Arabia. Do you find yourself having to be more conscious around your true self from a personal perspective or from a professional perspective?
I think there's something I have done in the beginning before I came here, and also that I still live by. Is like you have to really create clear boundaries, and also having non-negotiables and negotiables when it comes to adapting to a culture. For example, it's not necessary here. There's also no rules. I know there's so many misconceptions around Saudi and what the rules are. I'm driving a car here. I have no problem hiring cars. I know there's still this rumor out there that women cannot drive here, which is not a reality. I also there are no rules to cover your hair or anything. So I don't. Nobody here needs to wear hijab. Um, I think the only clothing rules we have is to cover shoulders and knees. So there are no shorts, no tank tops, stuff like that. And here, and this is, for example, something where we come to a like negotiable for myself. I've never been someone who, as a person, and a lot of coaches are, or a lot of, let's say, female coaches, for example, might be different in that way. and that's also completely fine. For example, clothing has never been of a lot of importance for myself. So I'm not someone who's really like, I don't need to wear shorts in order to feel free, and it has that's something that has been very easy for me because I don't express myself through clothes. And there are other coaches, and I fully understand that they wouldn't like to be to have that rule of, for example, not wearing shorts, not wearing a short top or whatever. But for me, that has been a negotiable that is very easy for me to deal with, because I'm just not the type of person who, yeah, expresses. I don't express myself through fashion or clothing or whatsoever. And then there are like non-negotiables that you have for yourself. Like, for example, these are small things where you have to where I thought about, like, as I said before, I have a fully tattooed arm. um one non-negotiable for me was like, okay, I never want to hide it because it's such a big part of me.
Yeah.
It is, even though others don't understand it. And here, especially here in Saudi, like tattoos is something that is not common at all. But I will not hide it because it's like part of me, and it's something that has been quite important to me. So that's something I will not hide. The same with, like, I will not cover my hair, even though there are no rules for it, so I don't have to. But that would have been like a non-negotiable for me. The same is like the same with like creating boundaries when it comes to interpersonal relationships and interactions. Like I always said, I will not, like, I mean, being a female coach is already, you already encounter a lot of like stereotypes and sexism, etc. And for me, from the beginning, I've always, because I'm very or I can be very confrontational when I experience something like that. And I've been like this in South Africa, and I've been like this in Germany and the UK. And whenever I encounter, or I feel like there's someone patronizing, or there's someone making sexist remarks, I've been very confrontational. I've always been very outspoken of that. And here it's the same. Like, I am the same way here. When I feel like someone's not taking me serious because I'm a woman, I also try to navigate it the same way I try to navigate it in any other country. So I'm not making any like, there are no different or I don't have different standards here than I have somewhere else. Even though, like, my experience here has been very different to what I expected. Like, actually, I have had positions here, and I have had roles, or also coaching jobs that are not that are also in Western countries and European countries, are not quite common to for female athletes to have. Like, this whole discussion, for example, around female coaches coaching male athletes beyond junior level. That's something that has been here. It wasn't a question here, or it hasn't been as questioned as people thought, or I was thinking in the beginning. I have no problem here with male athletes, even though they are some of them are quite conservative. And have different views on it, but on a personal level, but on a professional level, I haven't had any issues with male athletes here. And like, I actually made probably similar or same experience than anywhere else. So yeah, there's something that's why I said, I don't feel like I'm playing a role. I have been really still myself. I'm still the same person, or the same woman that has been coaching in rugby in South Africa, or that has been coaching weightlifting in Germany, or that has been working with a football federation in Luxembourg, for example. So it's like that's something where you have to be very aware of yourself, and where you have to be also very confident, I think, as a person, navigating a new culture, a new space. And then it's really about having clear boundaries. And the same then applies to dealing with athletes. I know I have quite a few rather strict Muslim athletes, and I do accommodate their personalities and also their culture a bit. Like something I have done is like I adapted training times to the prayer times, and someone else would probably say, well, if there's training and you schedule training as a coach, then that's on you. But I'm, for example, I accommodate the athletes that I'm working with. If like I have moved sessions earlier or later, or the different slots based on, because I know they value being on time with their prayers. So that's then, yeah, like I have no problem
Mm.
dealing with that. I try to work around it, and I consider the culture. It's the same with, and this is rather probably something I encountered here. There are so in the culture here, physical contact with women that are not related to you or not your wife. Yeah, it's difficult for some athletes. So I have some athletes, male athletes, that don't shake my hand, or they don't like me touching them in any kind of way. And I fully respect that, because it doesn't come from a position of I know them. It doesn't come from a position of disrespect. It just comes from our cultural perspective or a cultural background. And we have different ways of them showing me that they fully respect and tolerate me as a coach. For example, this whole we don't shake hands, or don't do a high five. We have different hand signs and movements where we say hello, which don't involve physical contact. If there's, for example, I adapt to, like, if I feel like, okay, I have to put, for example, the shoulder in a certain exercise into a position or whatever, I let someone else do it, or I work around it, and I fully respect that. And because I know, and because it has been clear from the relationship I have with those athletes, that it actually also comes from a point of respect, but based in their culture, like respect to women, or the respect here, it's a respectful gesture to not just touch a woman or not just shake her hand. And we might, from a Western or from a European perspective, we might see it very differently. But here it doesn't come from that, so that's why I tolerate, and I fully respect it myself.
Have you had to compromise at all on those values of honesty and accountability within the culture?
Yeah, so that's a very interesting question, and also something I think about a lot. Um, I do think sometimes I have to choose my words differently. I can be
Okay.
honest, but I cannot be as direct as I sometimes would like to be. But it was very similar, for example, in South Africa. I can be honest, but I have to pack it differently, or I have to communicate and choose my words differently. And the same with holding athletes accountable. It's the like I have to, yeah, I do adapt in the language I use, and the way I pack, the way I frame my feedback. um and another thing is like that, I have to live with, and I have been in many of those situations before, and like in South Africa, for example, also here in Saudi. Sometimes you have to deal, or you have to live with the consequences of of your honesty and and holding someone accountable not being perceived the way you want to. And then you have to make that internal, or I have that always that internal fight. Okay, do I be quiet now, or do I live with maybe negative consequences of what I'm gonna say now? So, and I always choose the latter, because I think I kind of developed I can deal with the heat. I can deal with big fights, and I can deal with even though it's still stressful, but I can deal with people being mad at me. That's something I think you have to come to terms with in as a coach in general. You will never be everybody's darling and happy and fine and great with everyone. There will be situations where people gonna be mad at you, and then you have to deal with it and you have to live with it. And I always choose that feeling instead of the feeling of oh well, I'm lying to someone, or I'm not being straightforward or not being honest, because actually for me that feels worse. Like I'd rather have someone not working wanting to work with me anymore, or being mad or angry or whatever for something truthful I said, instead of me just playing the game and just navigating that space. Even though I know that this is also sometimes necessary, and I also do that. There are people where you cannot just go into a room and just tell everyone the truth in like to their face. Just doesn't work like that. So sometimes you have to, especially if you have further goals, or you have to have there are bigger things than just telling everyone about like how you feel about them. So I do, obviously sometimes you have to like make that decision for yourself, if it's worth it to say what you want to say now, and if it actually leads to the outcome that you want to achieve. But at the same time also, like if you are honest to someone, then yeah, at least for me, it's always been like, okay, I stand by it, and if someone's mad at me, well, then that's how it is.
I have a final question for you. In your professional doctorate, you're considering PCDE, psychological characteristics of developing excellence, with respect to cultural differences. Some of those different cultures you've coached in, perhaps some of them prior to starting your DProf, South Africa, Luxembourg, obviously Germany, where you're from, and now Saudi Arabia. And I'm guessing there's going to be different attitudes towards, let's say, the mental side of any game, any sport. I mean, have you noticed, if you try to address athletes in certain cultural contexts, have you noticed differences in attitudes towards the mental side, or would you say everybody that you engage with across these cultures are like, yeah, mindset is really important? Is it individual specific? Is there a cultural difference there?
I think cultural difference, like I think the most interesting factor for me overall, like it has been it's quite interesting how similar it is between like now Saudi and Saudi Arabia, but like very different to Germany or the European countries that I worked in. The role of faith and the role of religion, and how much of an impact it has on the mental side of the athletes. And it's something I always underestimated a lot, because I'm myself not very religious. And I always had a really hard time to truly understand, and I probably will never understand what faith and religion means to certain people and certain athletes, and how much they draw from it. And it's really something that has been super interesting for me to see. First, I experienced like in South Africa, where I worked with very Christian athletes that really draw a lot of motivation and inspiration out of their faith. And then here in Saudi, it's even more with the Muslim athletes that I have. I mean, all of them are Muslim, but there are some who really get so much motivation out of their faith that some mental skill development literature from Europe wouldn't be applicable here. Like when it comes to motivation, etc. And I think it's still a very underexplored field. Like what big of a role faith and the religion actually play. I'm dealing at the moment with an injured athlete, a very seriously injured athlete, and I know that he struggles with mental health around this injury. Um, because of the consequences it has, and like being out of competition long term, and not being able to fulfill the goals and dreams that the athlete has. I think it's a normal reaction of like long term injury is a very it's a bit of a fragile mental state, and a bit of an issue with the athlete's identity. And he has so much faith in God, or it's Allah, helping him on this journey, that it's really impressive for me to see how much he draws out of it, and how much his whole attitude, and towards training or towards coming back, can change very fast with just something like a prayer. And I don't understand it because I cannot feel the same way. But it's really, really interesting to see. And this is why I try and I see it, or I notice it. And that's why I try to accommodate it a lot. So I give them a lot of freedom when in regards to practicing their faith, and also even bringing that to the training. Um, because I see how it helps them a lot on the mental side. Um, and then something here in Saudi that I noticed when it comes to motivation, there's like something that we have kind of that maybe was there in the past in Germany or European countries, but is not really it's not as strong as it maybe used to be, but it's really very strong here. Here it's really like the biggest honor in the world to represent your country. There's so much extrinsic motivation through family honor, and yeah, representing the country, doing it for your family. It's much stronger, or this motivational factor is much stronger than what I've experienced in Europe. And I kind of like, yeah, I kind of play with that as well, or I try to consider it in the way I approach, or the way I coach my athletes.
Fascinating stuff, and I could talk to you all day about it. I think it's absolutely fascinating, but I do want to be respectful of your time. So this is a good place to draw things to an end, and maybe we can have a follow-up conversation when you come towards the end of your studies to see the kind of things that you've uncovered and are thinking about at that stage of your coaching. So thank you so much, Elisabeth. That was absolutely awesome, and I know you will have tapped the interest of everybody listening in. I do know you're on X. I mean, how can people find you, follow you, and potentially get in touch?
Yeah. So I do have a profile on former Twitter, or now X. It's EO Performance. Same handle for Instagram, LinkedIn, my name. And I do answer. I'm really bad at answering emails because sometimes people send me emails, and I'm really not good at answering emails. But I do always answer my messages on social media. So yeah, that's probably the best way to reach out. I do have a website, which is not, I haven't updated for a while, but I do have one. It's eo-performance.com. Yeah, that's probably the best way to get in touch with me.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, everybody, I really enjoyed that podcast, and I'd love to hear what you, the listener, think. So please do get in touch via X or Facebook, or through my website, danabrahams.com, to tell me what you think of the show. And if you do have any suggestions, I'd be delighted to hear them. I'm already looking forward to next week's episode. Bye for now.